we welcome Dr. Arvind Mahajan to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it very much, Ben. Been meaning to be on your show for a while, and I'm so glad and grateful that you're having me this today.
Well, it is our pleasure. How was your weekend?
It was good. I got to see one of my former students who has started a startup in India. Had breakfast with him Saturday, and Saturday evening we had dinner with some of my poker buddies and their families.
Do you play Texas Hold'em? Do you play 5-card draw? What do you play?
Texas Hold'em.
Okay.
Yeah, we do variations, but sometimes things go crazy.
I'm sure they do. What is your favorite superpower?
To have the ability to know the unknown.
Okay. What would you use that for first?
So I'm in the business of discovering knowledge.
Okay.
But as I age, I realize that intellectual knowledge is not adequate for me.
Okay.
And as a human being, I'm seeking something beyond that. And one might call it spirituality.
Okay.
But intellectually, it is very hard to converge intellectual knowledge with spiritual understanding of yourself and the phenomena.
Yeah.
And it is that convergence which I have been seeking for a very long time. So there are limits to the scientific method of what we can discover. And there is something more, and that more is not easy to fully comprehend to a point where they converge. And I guess that is what Michelangelo was trying to depict in the hands, that gap there. It is that gap which I'm trying to bridge.
What is the most, for you personally, what has been the most profound understanding that you have come to through a non-scientific approach, if you don't mind my asking?
I think it's an understanding of yourself first. And that, I think, you cannot fully comprehend with the tools available to us through scientific method.
Right.
That deeper understanding of yourself. And only then, through yourself, can you understand the larger phenomena.
Right.
Oftentimes, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
But sometimes when you make progress, you kind of know what you don't know.
Right. That makes sense. Where did you grow up and what did your parents do? So
I grew up in New Delhi, or actually in India, we call it Delhi. I come from a family of freedom fighters. Actually, as perhaps you know, India was ruled by the British for a few hundred years.
Yeah.
And when they left, India was partitioned between Pakistan and what is India now. And my family was in the Pakistan part of India.
Okay.
They were landowners.
Yeah.
And the division of India was on religious grounds, at least from the Pakistan side.
Right.
So my family migrated to Delhi before I was born.
Okay.
And it was a dramatic shift for the family because they were large landowners and you can't carry your land with you. So they were paupers when they came to Delhi.
Okay.
But fortunately, the family was educated. So my dad was a professor of history and had law degree. And then over the years, a friend of his invited him to start a business, which was quite successful. So we had a printing and publishing enterprise in Delhi. And my mom and dad both were scholars. They cracked jokes after dinner in Sanskrit, which we barely picked up bits and pieces, found it quite humorous. So, and my mom raised the children and then was involved in social work through the Lioness Club. They had Lions Club and Lioness Club.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like this is a really rich but potentially very challenging childhood experience. What was your greatest challenge as a child?
I was very curious. And for someone to engage me, they really had to do a few things to get my attention. And so I was not the most engaged student in the classroom.
Okay.
And to be quite blunt about it, I found many of my professors and teachers to be quite boring. So that was my biggest challenge.
What was the learning process like for you? In my later learning in the MBA program, for example, I found that I do not do super well in the lecture format either. And I found that I didn't start learning things until I started doing the assignments. Once I could directly see the practical application, that's when it would start to make sense for me.
Yes.
Where did the learning happen for you? Because you said you finished in 3 years. It sounds like you did very well.
My real learning occurred in my MBA program.
Okay.
That is where I really engaged myself.
Okay.
So our family business had become fairly large. And I have an older brother, but he was not interested in business.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I was being groomed to take over the family business. Actually, during high school, I'll go to the plant and work in the back office. And during college, I would do the same. I'll work there. And then it was decided that an MBA will be good before I joined the family business full time.
Mm-hmm.
So I came to the United States really just to get an MBA for a year and go back.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And when I joined my MBA, I suddenly had a very different experience. The faculty here were very different. I could really relate to them. They were informal.
Uh-huh.
There was a lot more Socratic method, questioning, answering.
Okay.
A much deeper engagement. It was actually for the first time I found learning to be fun.
Huh.
And once that happened, I was all in. And, I was a straight A student and just discovered the joys of learning.
Give us a little bit on your career road through to today as Associate Dean of Graduate Programs. What was that? What was the rest of your journey?
Yeah. So it's been a long journey, although I must say it looks like it was yesterday I drove into College Station, but actually it was August of 1980 that I drove into College Station. A friend of mine had accepted a faculty position here. One of the people on my dissertation committees, his roommate at the University of Michigan was department head here.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the job market was really very good. I had offers from many university, and then I drove to College Station. I remember 2 days after I had interviewed at INSEAD in Fontainebleau.
Mm-hmm.
And loved the place, loved the people here, started as an assistant professor. The journey has been very eventful. In 1983, my primary area of research is international finance. But I really I wanted my students to work outside of Texas, and if possible, internationally.
Okay.
And what better arena to teach international finance than in an international setting.
Sure.
So I did the first study abroad. Perhaps it was the first study abroad in the College of Business, 1983. Took a small group of MBAs and senior undergrads to England and Scotland.
Huh.
And that was amazingly successful. So in 1986, I took another group of students single-handedly to Japan, Hong Kong, Korea, and mainland China before China was a sexy place to go to. I mean, they literally still had the barter system.
Yeah.
It was an amazing experience. But I could also see the transformation which that experience made to the development of my students. It was incredibly fulfilling. So I've been a very strong proponent of study abroads. At that time, there was no SIBS, there was no help. You had to do things by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I got involved at the university level in some policy-making committees and started a semester-long program in Santa Chiara in Tuscany in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Did that in 1992, moved my family there, did it again in 2001. Again, moved my family and kids went to school there. And have been involved in those for a long time. Is somewhat of a passion, international education. But along the way came other opportunities. For some reason, I was offered a position as senior consultant at Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company, which is now JP Morgan Chase, to be in charge of their training of their mid-level and senior executives in investment banking around the world. So we moved to New York, and that was an amazing experience. Actually, I learned my applied high finance from that experience. Along the way, then I came back. By this time, I had started PhD seminar in international finance, an area I'm deeply passionate about even today, and had the privilege of teaching our PhD students for 2 decades from not just Mays, but from many other colleges as well who were interested in that area. So that was one aspect of the journey. And then along the way, I got involved in administration. I was given opportunities to be the associate director for the Center for International Business Education and Research, and SIBS we have here.
Yeah.
My department had asked me to run our Aggies on Wall Street program, something, again, very close to my heart.
Yeah.
Which allowed us to place some students on Wall Street. I then was director of our MS finance program. I directed our CFA partnership program with the CFA Institute, where today we have our undergraduate, MBA, and MS finance programs all affiliated with the CFA Institute. At that time, we were the only university with all 3 programs affiliated. And then in the meantime, I'd been teaching in the MBA programs. I was the core faculty in the 80s. And then in 2007, and I was the founding instructor in our executive MBA program, which was natural given my Wall Street experience teaching executives. And then the dean asked me to take over the position of the associate dean for graduate programs. That was 5 years ago. And it has been a privilege in this job. I've learned a lot. It's very demanding, but I think it's incredibly fulfilling because in some small way, you can have an impact on a few things.
Tell us a little bit about the partnership with Humana and the upcoming case competition that they host at Mays.
Yeah, so Humana started as a very small idea. I had a student of mine, MBA student, Matt Larson. He came to me and he said he'd like to organize a small case competition here amongst the MBAs on analytics. And he had talked to a few other people and evidently was not getting much traction. So I sat down with him and I said, well, tell me more about it. So he was interested in doing case competition, was gung-ho, but had no resources or no formal plan. But he was so passionate that I could not ignore what he was saying because I wanted him to, one, have the opportunity of giving it a go, and 2, I thought there was potential beyond what we had discussed. So I said, I'll support you. Tell me what you need, and let's do it. So the first year we did it with virtually very little resources. Matt worked very hard, got his wife involved in the process.
Amber, yes.
Yeah, and the first year was successful, and seemed to me that there were possibilities in this. So I talked to my dean. Now, of course, Matt had to graduate and go about his career,
Yes.
Which he's been very successful at, which I knew given his enthusiasm and passion at that time when he talked to me in 2016-17. So it seemed to me that to really scale it up, what we needed was corporate partnership. We needed big data, and we needed some support from a corporation. So I talked to Dean Jones, and we discussed two possible organizations. The first one didn't pan out. The second one was Humana. And fortunately, as you know, the president and the CEO, Mr. Bruce Broussard, is an Aggie. So Dean Jones wrote to him, and they were interested. So we did a year with them. It was kind of a hodgepodge of things because their team had no idea what to expect, what to do. We were also learning ourselves. But in any case, the second year was again a success. And at that point, I said, if we really want to make an impact, we need to really make it big.
Okay.
Which means some serious work is needed to kind of restructure it and ask for more money. So I decided that I'm going to ask for a significantly more amount of support from Humana.
Sure.
Fully expecting that they'll say no.
Yeah.
But it was worth a go. Very long story short, they found that this participation was useful to Humana as well. And so we negotiated and we agreed to the terms. And today, the Humana Maze Healthcare Analytics Case Competition is unambiguously the premier case competition in the country in that space. And the award money this year is $80,000. So the team which comes first, the team which comes first walks away with $50,000. That's a significant incentive.
Sure.
Besides, of course, the recognition that you have competed against the best and won. So we had 2 years ago, we had 1,300 participants from more than 80 major universities in the United States. Last year was COVID. And again, we didn't know how it'll work out, but we ended up having 700 participants from 70 universities. We did it virtual, and it was very successful. And because it was virtual, I could invite Bruce Broussard and Dean Jones. Both their calendars are very tight. So they cannot fly into Houston.
Sure.
But because it was virtual, both of them could participate.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly exciting. So I am very proud of what that competition has accomplished. But what I'm even more proud of is the students, because it's a student-run competition. Matt, first year, did by himself. But then I realized that it is a lot of work. So I created a course, a 3-credit-hour course, where I select 3 students. Actually, I tell the last year's team to help me select the 3 new students because they know what's required.
Okay.
And then I give these students a lot of latitude in managing this process.
Right.
So it's one heck of an experience for the student team to communicate with Humana executives, to negotiate with them, to come up with strategies, to market the program. Of course, I provide them help and I jump in whenever there's a need. But really, it's a hands-on experience in us developing leaders in our own MBA program.
Sure. You mentioned that when you went back to renegotiate the terms with Humana, that you found that it added a lot of value for them, maybe value that you had not been previously aware of. What's the biggest piece of the value proposition for Humana?
Helping our MBAs. That was my initial ask. And the other case I made was that this will give publicity to Humana from a corporate social responsibility viewpoint, because ultimately the case competition is adding to the intellectual capital of the nation, right? Because we have students from all the top universities participating, and the skills they learn, getting their hands dirty with actually big data, solving a real problem, is one heck of an experience for them.
Yeah.
So the proposition which I made to them initially was small, but as we started doing this program, Humana realized that this was, Humana, like every large organization, interviews employees at all major universities.
Sure.
And this was bringing the best of the best to their doorstep. So from the second year onwards, they started sending the head of their employment group and the team to come and have a look at these students. And now they have requested us last couple of years that we give them some space to be able to interview the teams right there on spot.
That's brilliant.
They've been flying the teams into New York. So now they see this as a potential and very fruitful place to hunt for potential employees. The third benefit which emerged, which I'd mentioned to them earlier on, but it was not self-evident at that time, was that Humana was giving these students a problem which they had already more or less solved. And these are big problems like diabetes, opioid addiction, heart attacks. And what they want to do is, given this data, they want the students to come up with a model to predict who will, for example, have heart attack in the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, of course, is very simple, because given Humana's business, if a patient gets to a hospital, it costs Humana quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
So if they can identify a patient who will potentially go to the hospital and start remedial work before they get to the hospital,
Sure.
by focusing on them, providing them services, good nutrition, nursing, well-being training, and keep them healthy, it saves them significant amount of money. Why not? So they want these projects to help them in identifying avenues where they can save money and increase the bottom line, as businesses should. Last year's project focused on people who have difficulty getting to medical facilities because of lack of transportation. And how do you predict those who will have that difficulty and how it can be alleviated?
Right.
So I had suggested to them a couple of years ago to, instead of giving the students a problem they have already solved, to instead give them a problem they're themselves struggling with.
Yeah.
Because they have access to 1,000 pair of young, bright, hungry eyes looking at problems from different ways.
Sure.
And so last year, they attempted that, and it was very successful.
Okay.
So this is what Humana is doing now. They are giving problems they have not completely solved themselves and finding new solutions, new avenues of solving a very complex problem coming out of the case competition.
Yes. And you've mentioned previously that it has spawned case-style competition within subunits in Humana?
Yeah. So one of the executives was telling me that this has been talked about within the organization-wide, and now different units have created small teams to compete with each other, which to me is incredibly heartwarming.
Yeah.
That we are having a real impact on businesses.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's so aligned with the mission of Mays Business School of enhancing global prosperity.
Sure, advancing the world's prosperity. For our viewers and our listeners, when is this year's competition?
This year's competition is on November 11.
Okay.
at our beautiful facility at City Center in Houston.
Okay. And who is eligible to sign up?
All students in affiliated U.S. universities,
Okay.
whether they are full-time or part-time master's level programs.
Okay. Okay. And if anyone wants to learn more, where can they go to do so?
maze.tmu.edu/humana-tamu analytics.
Perfect. Are there any deadlines they should be aware of?
September 8th is our kickoff. We'll be virtually talking to potential participants and giving them details about how to register, what the competition will entail, etc. And the deadline for registration is September 17th.
Okay, perfect. Rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
High school.
Okay.
Used to play soccer.
Yeah.
Played right in. I thought I could dribble pretty well.
Yeah.
We were playing Indian Navy team. I had got the ball past everyone. It was only the goalkeeper and the goal.
Yeah.
And I knew I could go past him through dribble, which I always did. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the infirmary.
Oh.
And this goalie came to me later on and said, "Hey, sorry, kid. We just can't let a high school team win over us."
Okay.
He was very apologetic, but he said, and I don't know, no foul was called.
Okay.
So I don't know what happened. But it was a lot of food for thought. And what I concluded was, when you are in a different circumstance, don't assume that old rules will work.
Oh, okay.
When you're in a new circumstance, recalibrate everything. It's a different ballgame. And that has held me in good stead.
Okay. Different ballgame, very literally in this case. What is something you are really interested in that people might be surprised by?
I think philosophy and art.
Yeah.
And philosophy started much earlier. As a matter of fact, I'll share with you, when I got my first paycheck here,
yeah,
half of that money I sent to my dad, just as a way of saying thank you. Not that he needed the money, but sometimes in my family, saying thank yous and I love you is not easy saying that. We deeply love each other, but we just don't say it. So that was my way of, and the other half went as down payment to the great books of the Western world.
Okay.
Which has been a very influential and probably one of the best investments I've made in my life.
Okay. What of the great books, which one do you think has had the biggest impact on you?
Well, the first one right off the bat is called The Great Conversations.
Okay.
So Mortimer Adler, he's the associate editor of these series, the late Mortimer Adler, who was a professor at the University of Chicago. The first volume is called The Great Conversations. These are the conversations which philosophers have been having with each other over the millennia. Through the works which are then in the subsequent volumes. And in some ways, that first book has been very inspirational to me because I see my classes now, have been for a while, as just an arena to have a great conversation.
Love that. What is it You've been at Texas A&M quite a while now. What is your fondest memory of the university?
One I remember was 1983, and that talks about the Aggie Network.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we just got married. We were walking in London. I was doing that study abroad.
Yeah.
I was wearing an A&M t-shirt, and a Bentley went past us, and I didn't notice. I kind of noticed it, but ignored it. It made a U-turn, came right back. Young man rolled down the window and he said, "You wearing an A&M t-shirt, sir?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "How come?" And I said, "Well, I teach there. I got a bunch of Aggies." And he said, "Really?" Turns out he was an Aggie.
Okay.
And he had been very successful in the bond market business, in the Euro bond market business.
Okay.
And he said, "Are you doing anything this Friday?" And I said, "Yeah, we are tied up." He said, "How about Saturday?" I said, "Saturday, we are free." where he rented a boat for my group
That's great.
on the Thames with a wet bar.
Yeah. All right.
Which the students, I told them to stay away from, right?
Right.
And food. So that was, and similar things have happened so many times, but that one has always stuck out of what the network really is.
Yeah.
The second event, which I'll never forget, is 1985. That was one of the first football games my wife went with me to. It was an A&M UT game. We were standing in the student section. Jackie Sherrill was the coach at that time. UT and A&M were tied, and that game had championship consequences. And we whipped UT 42-10, if I recall correctly, and the stadium was moving. That experience was just unbelievable.
I can only imagine. I was very young in the height of the Jackie Sherrill glory days, but when I coached briefly here under Coach Fran, and we would be up in the press box, and when, I don't know if this is still true in the new stadium, but at the old stadium, when they would saw the horns off, the press box would shake.
Yeah.
And so the first time Bill Clay was our safeties coach in 2006, I think it was. And the first time that happened, the press box starts to move, and he throws both hands against the wall and says, "It's an earthquake." So
now it's an experience. Watching a football game on Kyle is an experience, especially when it's UT.
Sure.
But now we are developing new competition with
rivalries.
Alabama.
Yeah. Yep. SEC. What habit have you developed recently that you would say has greatly contributed to your continuing success?
Yeah, it's less of a habit and more of, again, self-awareness and learning, especially in this job, learning the value of team building, motivating people. I think getting people to focus on the same goal, becoming a better listener. I've certainly become a better listener, and truly a servant leader. You really realize you are here to serve. There is so much fulfillment which comes from that. The notion of servant leader, I'd heard it before, but didn't fully comprehend what it means. This job gave me a clear idea of why it is desirable to be a servant leader.
I love that. Anyone you would like to send good bull?
Yeah, actually, I will. I was mentioning to you the Aggie I had breakfast with on Saturday morning. So two guys, my former students, Adriel Maniego and Arjun Ahluwalia. They were a part of my Aggies on Wall Street program. They worked in Houston, New York, and Mexico, investment banking and consulting. And then they came and visited with me and told me that they had an intention of starting a startup in India. And I was surprised. So then I asked them to put down the concept on my whiteboard. Because I was not, in the beginning, I was not really engaged, but they asked me a lot of questions. So I finally put it down the whiteboard. And they drew it. And they went to India. And they have started a startup called Jai Kisan 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it has taken off. But I want to recognize them because they are doing good for society. They have started a fintech platform which facilitates funding small farmers in India.
Okay.
This is a space where very little work is being done, and they are pioneers, and they really want to help people. They really carry with them the Aggie spirit. And again, I think enhancing global prosperity is so consistent with that. So both those guys, Arjun and Adriel.
Good bull to them. Good bull to you as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. We appreciate your support. Drop us a like below and feel free to leave a comment if you wish. We appreciate positivity and constructive feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes and bonus content. You can also take us on the road using your favorite podcast listening app. We have those linked below. If you'd like to know more about Mays Business School or our guests, visit mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Talk with you soon.